of Oceanus Procellarum. In November 1969, the crew of Apollo 12 executed mankind's second precision landing on the lunar surface. Astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean touched down in a vast, dark volcanic plain known as Oceanus Procellarum, the Ocean of Storms. To the public watching on televisions across the globe, the mission was a flawless textbook success. It was a demonstration of absolute technological mastery, solidifying America's dominance in the space race. The astronauts cracked jokes, collected pristine geological core samples, and retrieved vital components from the robotic Surveyor 3 spacecraft which had landed on the Moon years prior. For nearly 6 decades, that was the definitive history. It was a sterile, tightly controlled narrative managed by NASA Public Relations and archived in standardized history textbooks. But on June 12, 26, under the sweeping transparency mandates of the historic Pursuit Disclosure Directives, the United States Department of Defense was forced to release a massive, unredacted archive of classified military data from the Apollo era. Among these newly unsealed tranches were the raw, uncensored telemetry logs, high-resolution photographic negatives, and classified communication transcripts from Apollo 12. The files reveal a chilling reality. NASA was not alone in the ocean of storms. What the astronauts photographed on the distant horizon, and the frantic military response that followed in the dark rooms of Houston, was immediately placed under a high-level operational blackout that lasted for over 50 years. Part 2. The Metallic Silhouette. For decades, any mention of strange anomalies in Apollo photography was dismissed by mainstream academics as amateur speculation, film defects, or reflections from the lunar module's thermal insulation blankets. But the unredacted negatives contained in the Pursuit tranches strip away those defensive explanations completely. When naval photo interpreters at the National Photographic Interpretation Center received the film canisters after the splashdown of Apollo 12, they performed an exhaustive frame-by-frame analysis under maximum security protocols. Frame 4982 captured the anomaly with terrifying clarity. Directly above the lunar horizon, suspended in the total vacuum of space, was an immense, geometrically perfect metallic structure. It was not a faint smudge, a stray particle of dust on the lens, or a cosmic ray striking the silver halide film emulsion during transit. The object possessed an undeniable, massive physical presence. It was a stark, angular silhouette composed of sharp geometric lines that defied any natural geological formation. But the detail that sent shockwaves through the military intelligence community wasn't the object itself. It was what the object was doing to the lunar landscape below. Radar frequencies, making it virtually invisible to early ground-based tracking stations on Earth. It sat there like a silent sentinel, casting its long, dark shadow toward the 2 human explorers who had dared to walk across the lunar plains. Part 3. The Telemetry Breakdown. While Conrad and Bean stood frozen on the lunar surface, staring at the distant structure, a secondary crisis was unfolding beneath the skin of their spacesuits. The June 26 declassifications included the raw, unedited telemetry streams from the portable life support systems worn by the astronauts. These systems monitored everything from oxygen consumption and heart rates to internal suit pressure and localized radiation levels. The moment the geometric shadow of the object touched the edge of the crater where the astronauts were standing, the active electromagnetic sensors on both suits registered an instantaneous, cataclysmic spike in localized radiation. It wasn't cosmic radiation or solar wind. It was a highly structured, coherent, high-frequency electromagnetic pulse oscillating at a precise frequency that did not match any piece of onboard American equipment. The energy surge was so intense it immediately began to bleed into the primary communication loops. The clear audio link between the Moon and Mission Control in Houston disintegrated into a chaotic wall of low-frequency hums and rhythmic, pulsing static. The astronauts could barely hear each other inside their helmets, and their telemetry data packets began to fracture, leaving Houston blind to their vital signs. The military officers in Houston did not waste time analyzing the scientific implications of the phenomenon. They were operating under strict defense protocols. They knew that an unknown, potentially hostile physical platform was operating in direct proximity to a multi-billion-dollar national security asset and 2 United States military officers. The unredacted audio logs capture the harsh, demanding voice of an unnamed military director transmitting directly to Pete Conrad. The order was absolute, leaving no room for debate or scientific curiosity. The astronauts were commanded to immediately terminate their geological survey, abandon the core samples they had spent the last hour drilling, and alter their return path to the lunar module. They were ordered to move along the low ridges of the craters, using the natural topology of the moon to break line of sight with the structure on the horizon. Part 4. The Scrubbed Archives. The return journey to the lunar module was a frantic, exhausting race against a collapsing life support system. The intense electromagnetic field generated by the structure was causing the batteries in the astronauts' suits to drain at twice their normal operating rate. Conrad and Bean stumbled through the powdery dust, their hearts hammering against their ribs, navigating through the long shadows of the lunar landscape, while the radio in their ears continued to pulse with that unnatural, rhythmic hum. They reached the ladder of the lunar module, intrepid, scrambled up the rungs, and sealed the hatch behind them. The moment the internal cabin pressure equalized and the heavy metallic hull of the lander acted as a makeshift Faraday cage, the electromagnetic interference ceased as abruptly as it had begun. The static vanished, replaced by the heavy, ragged breathing of 2 terrified men who had just looked behind the curtain of the cosmos. When the Apollo 12 command module safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on November 24, 1969, the machinery of total government censorship was already in full motion. The film canisters containing the panoramic sequences were immediately confiscated by military police before they could be processed by standard NASA laboratories. The original magnetic telemetry tapes recorded at the tracking stations in Australia and Spain were seized under national security warrants. The astronauts themselves were subjected to weeks of intensive, isolated debriefings conducted by intelligence officers from the Defense Intelligence Agency. They were forced to sign strict, lifelong non-disclosure agreements under the penalty of treason, ensuring that what they saw in the ocean of storms would never pass their lips. For 57 years, the official scientific establishment maintained a fortress of denial. When independent researchers pointed out strange anomalies, missing frames, and suspicious smudges in the publicly available Apollo photo catalogs, NASA issued standard, sterile press releases. They claimed that any perceived structures were simply optical illusions, reflections of internal cabin lights, or the result of amateur enthusiasts overanalyzing low-resolution scans. They asserted that the temporary communication dropouts during the Apollo 12 mission were merely the result of mundane hardware glitches and standard atmospheric interference on Earth. It was a highly effective, decades-long campaign of psychological containment, designed to keep humanity focused on the romantic narrative of peaceful space exploration while masking the cold, militarized reality of the lunar frontier. The files leave no room for alternative interpretations. We did not stop going to the moon because it was too expensive, or because the public lost interest. We stopped going because we finally understood the true nature of the territory we were invading. We discovered that the moon is not an empty, dead rock waiting to be colonized by humanity. It is an ancient, occupied outpost, governed by forces that possess technological capabilities that make our most advanced nuclear arsenals look like primitive stone tools. Welcome back to the Lost Timeline.